welcome to another off-the-shelf board game tutorial video. This week we're going to look at Rockwell. Rockwell is an interesting combination of worker placement, area control, with a little bit of auction mechanics thrown into create an interesting Euro game designed for 2 to 4 players, ages 14 up. They say the average playtime is about 90 minutes, but it seems to go closer to the 2 hours and maybe slightly longer mark. That's with a 4-player game. 3-player games should go closer to that 90-minute mark, but a 4-player game, again, should probably go closer to 2 hours. In Rockwell, players are one of 4 minor mining companies that have just recently been purchased by the big mega corporation Rockwell, and you're trying to prove that you're the best new acquire for your big business partners so you can move on to bigger and better things. The way you win with Rockwell is by proving that you're the best new acquisition for your big partner, and you do that by being the first to accomplish various achievements. And this is actually a race because the first time you get the achievements worth the most amount of points, but as players start getting those achievements that are being gained, they're going to be worth less and less points. For example, the first person to reach the center of the earth is going to get 6 victory points. The second player is only going to get 5, third player is only going to get 4, and the final player is going to get only 3. So again, this is a race to be the first to complete the accomplishment to get the most victory points. You're also going to get victory points for managing to make deliveries of various different minerals such as zinc, copper, silver, and gold. And the way you're going to get these resources is by using your workers to start digging up the planet to get all these wonderful resources that you're going to sell and work towards these achievements to win the game. Every time a part of the board is dug up, you're going to get a certain amount of resources, but you have to be careful because sometimes if you're unprepared, you're going to run into dangers. And if you don't have a safety crew or insurance, it's going to hurt you, and it can hurt you pretty big. To complicate the game just a little more, you can also bribe other players, hire subcontractors, work the stock market to start making some money, and also slowly improve your crews, making them much more efficient and able to go into the deeper layers of the earth to get the more valuable resources. Can you most efficiently allocate your vice presidents onto the various phase boards, dig deep into the planet Earth and get all the best resources, become the most prestigious, newest acquisition to the Rockwell company, and win the game? That is Rockwell, the board game. Before I show you how to play Rockwell, there's a few things I want to explain to you and just make sure you understand these concepts before we actually start playing. The first and the most important thing about Rockwell is this game does have hidden mechanics. That's going to be very difficult for me to teach you how to play a game if it's got hidden mechanics, so basically I'm going to have everything out in the open. Generally when you play it, each player does get 1 shield, and the things you keep behind the shield are the amount of victory points you've gotten for your deliveries, and these are your deliveries on this board right here. They are zinc, they are copper, and forgive me if occasionally I will refer to as bronze. Why, I can't get through my head, but I always call it bronze for some crazy reason. This is silver and this is gold. Anytime you purchase one of these delivery tokens, they're going to go behind your shield. They're worth victory points at the end of the game, and nobody's allowed to know exactly which one of those you have behind your board. The next thing are going to be your resources. Again, your resources are going to stay behind your board because they are also worth victory points at the end of the game, and no other player is allowed to know exactly how many victory or resources you have. Finally, your money is also going to be kept behind your board. No other player is allowed to know exactly how much money you have left over. So again, just to reiterate, everything that's going to be behind your secret board, and it's these things only, is going to be your delivery tiles for victory points, your resources, and your money. Of course, I can't really show you how to play a game like that, so we're going to go ahead and do away without those shields. The other thing to understand about Rockwell is the game is going to be set up differently depending on how many players you have actually playing the game. Now, I have the game set up for a 4-player game, and the reason why is because I think the game plays best as a 4-player game. And I'll definitely get into that when I discuss my review. The game does play 2, 3, or 4 players. With 2 players, there's an AI player. 3 players, there's no AI player. And then with 4 players, you get everything that you see right here. Now, it's very important to differentiate here because these boards are double-sided. As you flip them over, you're going to see that there's different things on each side. Now, this is the 3-player side of this board, and the way you tell is up here, and it's very small. If you're not ready or not expecting what to look for, you won't quite understand what to look for. So understand, for a 2 or 3 player game, you'll see on this board it looks like 2 meeples, 3 meeples on that side, and if you flip it over in the exact same spot, it shows 4 meeples. So that is a side used for a 4-player game. Additionally, with this board down here, you see 3, 4 meeples. This is for a 3 or 4 player side. And finally, the phase 1 board, you see 3 or 4 meeples. Again, this is a 3 or 4 player side. If I flip it over, it'll be for the 2-player side. This will also go for the player boards, and this one's a little bit more unique how you tell which side of the board it is. If you look at the picture frame right here, you're going to see 4 faces. That is for the 4-player side. If you flip it over, the same picture frame only has 3 faces. It's kind of subtle, kind of interesting. I actually like it in a nice thematic aspect, but when you're learning the game, you need to understand 4 players and 4-player boards. Flip them over for 2 or 3 players depending on each specific board. Now there's 2 other components that also follow this same kind of mechanic, and this is also going to go for your safety tiles or your safety workers, which are these circular discs. Now if you look at these tiles, you're going to see 4 meeples and 4 meeples. Each player gets 2 of these discs. There's a completely different set of discs. You're not going to flip these over because you're going to use both sides of these discs for the 4-player game. There's actually a completely different set of discs used for the 2 and 3-player game. And this is also going to go finally for the mine shafts. Now again, very small. You're going to see a picture of 4 little meeples, letting you know that's for the 4-player game. And then the extra set is going to show 2, and it's going to show a 3rd meeple who's kind of slightly grayed out. That's going to let you know this set is going to be for the 2 or 3-player game. So again, to avoid the confusion, you get 1 set of pieces for a 2 and 3-player game. You're going to get 1 set of pieces for a 4-player game only. So again, I'm showing you how to play the 4-player game, so when you're setting up, make sure you make that distinction. It's going to make a huge difference when you're playing the game. Also, finally, to save time, I did build the board in advance. Now this board has to be built every time you play the game. You'll see that's made up of a whole bunch of these little sections. And the important thing when you're setting up the board is, and there's only pretty much one way to set it up because these pieces are going to be smaller as you get closer to the core of the earth. But the important thing is you have to understand is you need to alternate these. So the outer ring is 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4 all the way around, 5, 6, 5, 6. Again, you have to alternate. 7, 8, 7, 8, 9, 10, 9, 10. You have to alternate as you build the board. And you also have to watch these little notches right here. Each notch has to line up with the line between the 2 pieces ahead of it, so you know that this piece can move from here to here, or go from here to here, here to here, etc. And I'm going to explain that when I explain how you play the game, but just know that this board does have to be set up a special way. But every one of these pieces is going to be shuffled beforehand because they each have a different symbol on the back of them that no player is going to know about before you start the game. So randomize these, but then flip them over onto the side that shows numbers up top. Don't look at the back sides because again they're all different, and then set the board in the pattern 3, 4 all the way around, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 all the way to the center of the earth. Now there's one final thing that you understand when you're setting up Rockwell, and again I did all this off camera because I'm trying to save time. This game can take about 15 minutes to set up unless you have everybody kind of working together to set up. If you're all alone trying to set this up, it can take an easy 15, possibly 20 minutes, so make sure you're getting the other players in to help you set up the game. When you're setting up the game, you want to make sure the delivery tiles are set up in a very specific order. The tile that's going to be on the top and usually worth the least amount of victory points is going to be the number 2, and the last tile on the bottom is going to be the 8. These are going to be counted from numbers 2 all the way through 7 and all the way through 8, and you make sure you set each one of these 4 stacks up that way every single time. It's very important. Don't make the mistake of doing 8 on top because that is wrong. The number 2 starts on the top because this game is a race. Everything in the beginning is easier at the beginning. It gets harder to score victory points as the game goes on, so you want to be the first to get these accomplishments, and that helps facilitate the fact that this game is a race. Then finally you have the achievement tiles down here. There are going to be 9 of them. They come in 3 tiers, and I call them 3 tiers because they're worth different amount of victory points. Tier 1 is worth 1 through 4, Tier 2 is worth 2 to 5, Tier 3 is worth 3 through 6, and also these are going to help bring about the end of the game. Now the very important thing about these achievement tiles is they're set up the exact opposite of these tiles. Now with these tiles, it's the least amount of victory points go on top, whereas opposed to the achievement tiles, it's the most amount of victory points are actually going to go on top. So you see the first person to make it to the center of the world is going to get 6 victory points, while the last person doing a 4-player game is only going to get 3 victory points. So again, it's kind of a race to be the first one to get the achievement. The first person to get the achievement gets the most victory points. The last person to get the achievement gets the least amount of victory points. So you want to be working really hard, working really fast, and working really efficiently to get these achievements, because these achievements are going to be your major victory points at the end of the game. Additionally, there's no set ending to this game. This game is going to end with one of 2 things happen. And when one of those 2 things happen, you're going to finish out the entire round. Once that round is over, you're going to add up all the victory points, and whoever has the most victory points is going to be the winner of the game. Now the first way that the game can end is if a majority of the players reach the center of the earth. And every time a player reaches the center of the earth with one of their pawns, that pawn has basically gotten a hot foot and they are basically removed from the game for the rest of the game. So you want to make sure you don't do this too soon, but of course you don't want to wait too long because that is worth an achievement at the end of the game. So once the majority of players have reached the center of the earth with one of their pawns and have that pawn removed from the game, that means the game is going to be over. And by majority, so in a 4-player game, that means once 3 players have reached the center of the earth, the game is going to be having its last round. In the 3-player game, majority is going to be 2 players, so once 2 players make it there, same thing. Now the other way the game can come to an end is if when one player has managed to acquire 6 of these achievements here. The trick is that 3 of those 6 achievements have to be the tier 3 or the final best achievements. Then you get 3 mixed up of these other 6 right here. So once one player has gotten all 3 of these and at least 3 of these set over here, and that's why I kind of put them off to the side as kind of a nice mental reminder to the other players. As soon as that happens, that's going to mean that this is going to be the final round. You're going to go through the 3rd phase, add up the points, and that is going to be the end of the game. Now, I don't want to get too long-winded here, and I don't want to intimidate you because actually Rockwell is a very intuitive game to play once you understand how to play it. Just understand the first couple of times it can seem a little bit overwhelming, so I want to make sure I definitely explain how you win the game so you know what you're working towards when you're playing Rockwell. Now the game of Rockwell is played over rounds, and each round is broken up into 3 phases, which are represented by one of these phase boards. This is the phase 1 board, this is the phase 2 board, and finally the phase 3 board. Now when you're working the phase 1 board, you're generally going to be working through the main game board itself. Once you've cleared phase 1, you're not going to really use the main board too much unless you trigger or dig, and I'll explain that when we get to that point. The next thing you're going to have is your phase 2, where you're going to sell your resources on the stock market or buy resources or anything along those lines in an effort to try to accomplish these achievements. And then finally, during the 3rd phase, you get a chance to make your deliveries for victory points, and you also get a chance to improve your crews by increasing their ability to drill, by buying mine shafts, which are going to give you resources over a continual rest of the game. Once you manage to build a mine shaft, they're going to continue to give you resources for the rest of the game. Or you can hire a safety commissioner, which is going to protect you from bad drilling or accidents that may happen while you're drilling. And finally, you can get the ability to be more efficient and move quicker around the earth. Now, the interesting thing about Rockwell is that you only have 2 vice presidents to work for you, and there's 3 boards that you can send those vice presidents to. And if a vice president doesn't go to a board, you don't actually get to interact with that phase of the game. Now, your vice presidents are represented by these meeples. Now each player is going to get exactly 2 of these meeples in their color, and that's going to be their vice president. Now the important thing, like I said, you have to understand here is that if you don't place your president on one of these boards, you're not going to be able to get to do what that event does. You're not going to be able to interact with that phase of the game. Additionally, you'll notice that a lot of these boards are crowded resources. You'll see that only 3 players can place their vice presidents on the stock market board. So that happens to mean that if these 3 players manage to get their vice presidents on the stock market board, purple is not going to be able to buy or sell resources this round. Luckily, they'll be able to interact with the 1st and the 3rd phase board, but that does log out the player, and that is part of the strategy for the game. Now, at the very start of the game, every player is going to start off with a couple resources in the beginning. Every player is going to start with 3 zinc cubes, 2 copper cubes, and 1 silver cube, and $3,000 worth of cash. In the beginning of the game, you're going to randomize the player order, and usually the easiest way to do that is just shake it up and place them down up here on the phase 1 board in whatever order you like. Once you've done that, you're going to go ahead and go to the auction phase for the game. For the rest of the game, these will be known as your management cubes, and you're also going to place the cubes in the exact same order on this section of the phase 1 board, and these are going to be referred to as your control cubes. Now don't get confused because these terms are used quite a bit in the rules. Remember, these are your management cubes and these are your control cubes. Both of them are on the phase 1 board, and both of them are very, very important. At the beginning of the game, the players are going to have an auction for player order in which order they're going to place their vice presidents on the board. Now remember, like I showed you earlier, it can be very, very important to make sure you are the earlier placer for your vice presidents on the board, because a lot of these resources, or a lot of these spaces, are finite, and once they're used up, if you don't put your vice president there, you don't get to interact with that section of the game board. So at the start of the game, each player is going to reach behind their personal player shield and grab a certain amount of resources and a certain amount of money, And this can be anywhere from 0 all the way to as much as you have behind your board, depending on how important it is for you to go first in placing your vice presidents on the board. Each player is going to put that amount of resources and money in their hand. They're going to stick out their hand in the center of the board, and everybody at the same time is going to reveal, and that's going to base what order your management cubes are going to start being reshuffled at that point. The player who auction off the most is going to be the first person to place their vice presidents on the game board. Second highest, third highest, and finally the lowest auctioneer is going to place their vice presidents on the board in that exact order. And for example, if we'd done our auction phase and green had been the highest bidder, yellow second, purple had been third, red had been last, that is the order the players are going to place their vice presidents on these phase boards in order. So green would place one of their vice presidents on the board, white would place on the board, purple would place next, and then finally red would place, and then it would go in the exact same order until each player has both of their presidents on the board. The trick is you cannot put your vice president twice on the same board. You have to make sure you have one vice president on each different board, but again, you only have two vice presidents, so you have to make sure you pay very good attention to exactly what you're doing there. Now the interesting thing about this is as you're using the various boards, they're going to give you different abilities throughout that round of the game. So we're going to see that these three players are going to be able to use the special abilities of this board. These three players are going to use the special abilities of the round 2 board. And finally, only these two players are going to be able to use the board that allows you to upgrade your crew during the third phase. Once every one of the players has placed their vice presidents on one of the phase boards, it's possible that the control boards are going to change order. And that's going to be based on if anybody placed any of their vice presidents in one of these 4 slots. Now you notice that 2 of the slots are reserved for the bribery pile, and 2 of the slots are reserved for the hiring the subcontractors pile, but they're numbered 1 through 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So what we're going to do is we're going to rearrange the control cubes based on if any players place vice presidents on one of these 4 spaces. So we're going to see that purple is going to be the new player 1, red is going to be the new player 2, green is going to be the new player 3, which means white is going to be the 4th player for the rest of this round. Now again, remember your management cubes and your control cubes are quite separate. The order of your management cubes, what you auction for, is going to decide in what order you get to place your vice presidents. But once you place your vice presidents, your control cubes are going to decide in what order players are going to operate their drillers and the workers on the main game board. Now, not only does placing your vice presidents on one of these 4 spots give you the ability to affect the order in which players are going to play on the board, it's also going to give you some special abilities. Now, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but just know that purple and red for the rest of this round have the ability to use bribes, and green, and only green, has the ability to use subcontractors for the rest of this round. At the end of the third phase, which will end this current round, all subcontractors and all briberies are going to return to the phase 1 board, which means they'll be usable by any player who decides to put one of their vice presidents on one of these 4 slots on the next round. Now once players are done with their vice presidents, they're going to move on to moving their minors on the main board. Now the interesting thing about the main board is every player is going to be able to move up to 4 minors during their first phase of the round, and on top of that they're also going to be able to drill various sections of the board based on the strength of the minors and how much strength is required to get through that section of the board. Now each one of these sections again are numbered from 3 all the way up to 10, and that's how much strength in minors it takes to break through that section. Now the interesting thing about Rockwell is it doesn't actually stop you from going into lower layers. If you want to waste your movement to move all the way down, you can. It's just that you cannot drill through these various sections, which are going to give you the resources you need to get the victory points and win the game, unless you actually have enough strength crew on that spot to actually drill through there and get the resources from that spot. Now the way you drill through a spot on the board is if you have a total strength on a spot equal to the strength of that section. Once that happens, that section is going to be drilled through, and these players, all the players in that section, are going to share the resources that are going to be achieved by going through that layer of the planet. Now again, this happens immediately. As soon as you have enough strength on that section of the board, that section of the board is going to be immediately revealed. It doesn't matter if it happens to be 3 strength 1 players, or if you happen to have one person with a 2. And if, for example, he has another strength 2 worker, as soon as he has enough strength to break through that layer of the crust, You're going to flip over that section showing that it's been drilled for the rest of the game, and then you're going to draw one of these resource cards based on the location on the board. Now each one of these cards is going to match a section on the board. Section 3 is going to get a 3 card, section 10 is going to get a 10 card, and you simply flip over the top card, and that's how many resources are going to be available, and they can fluctuate and become more valuable as you work your way deeper into the core of the earth. Once you flip over a resource card, what you're going to do is, if there's only one player on that space, they get to get all those resources. But if there happen to be more than one player on that space, they have to split the resources as evenly as possible. And if you're unable to split the resources evenly, you're going to give the excess resources depending on the priority set by the rules. Now the priority of the extra is going to be based on a certain amount of criteria, and you're basically going to go through these criteria until you meet the first one. As soon as you do, that's going to be the player who's going to get the excess resources. And then basically the way it's going to work is, the first criteria to see who gets the excess resources is you're going to see if any player happens to have a mining shaft on that space. If that player does, even if they didn't actually have a worker there, for example, if we have this example, we have red and white on the space, and if green just happened to have a mining shaft there, green actually gets to get the excess resources. And the way it would work is, white and red would split these resources as evenly as possible, which would be 1 zinc, 2 copper for red, 1 zinc, 4 copper for white, and then you have 1 excess which can't be split evenly between these two players, so green's going to happen to get the excess, and that's going to go on to their player board. Now this is actually not the perfect example, because mine shafts have to be brought into the game in a very special way, and a mine shaft can't actually be added to a board once it's been flipped over. So this isn't a perfect example, but I just want to illustrate the first requirement for excess going to a player. I'll explain mine shafts, and I'm also going to explain insurance in just a little bit, and safety commissioners, but I just want to explain the board right now. The second criteria, if there's no mine shaft at a space, is you're going to figure out who has the most power at a location. And the way you figure out who has the most power is you add up the total amount of workers on that space. So for example, in this instance, red has 2 power, white has 1 power. Now if it happened to be like this, the players would be tied for 2 and 2. Or for example, if it happened to look just like this, again that would be a tie, 2 for 2. The way it only works is if one player has the most power, that person is going to get the excess resources. Now finally, the third way, if you don't have a mine shaft and if you don't have a player with the most powerful workers in a location, you're going to decide who actually gets the excess resources based on who was the player who actually moved into the space and triggered the excavation. So for example, if this happened to be white's turn, and if the board happened to look just like this, red had moved over here, and white had decided to move onto the space right after red because of white's turn, you'd flip over the board. Since white was the one who actually moved into the space and triggered the excavation, in this example, white would get the excess minerals. Now this can get a little bit tricky here, and this is one of the things that you need to get used to with Rockwell. And again, once you're used to how the mechanics work, it flows very, very well, but it's just something you need to understand. To use an example down here is if these 3 players happen to be on the number 7 space, so we have a total of 6 strength, not quite enough to break open this layer, and if the green player happened to move one of his workers onto the space, we'd have 2 plus 2 plus 2 is 6 plus 1 is 7. That would be enough to excavate that space. We'd simply flip it over, and then we have a 3-way tie, plus we have a player who only has 1 strength. Now since all these players are tied, they're not going to get the majority of resources. It's actually going to be the player who moved into the space and triggered the excavation. Even though green in this example has the least power here, it happens to be that since all these players are tied, the player who moved into the space, even though they have the least amount of power, triggers the excavation, so in this case green would get the excess. And that's one of the tricky things to learn about Rockwell when you're first learning how to play the game, but there's some very good examples in the rulebook if you have any problems. Just remember the priority is mine shaft, power, and then if it's ties, it's the last player, or I should say the current player who moves into that space. Now phase 1 of the game is going to be played over 4 movements, and you're going to track that with this little movement pawn. The beginning of phase 1, you're going to get the option to buy insurance, and I don't want to explain insurance just yet. Just remember, first thing you do is get the option to buy insurance. Then you're going to have a first movement phase where each player is going to move one of their pawns, 1 single space, and if they happen to have a special ability that allows them to move even further, they can use that. Once each player has moved their pawns one additional space, you're going to have an additional movement phase where every player gets to move one pawn. Third, fourth, and then finally you're going to get the phase where all mine shafts, if they happen to be on a space that can produce, they're going to produce base resources based on the symbols on this revealed space. Now again, I want to emphasize that mine shafts cannot be built on a space that has already been revealed. So I could never build a mine shaft on this space once it's been revealed, but I can always build a mine shaft here and hope that eventually enough players move on to the space to reveal it, and then once that space has been revealed, that mine shaft is going to produce for this player for the rest of the game. As long as they have a mine shaft there, and the amount that's going to be produced is going to be based on the section, and it'll show exactly what is produced there. In this example, we produce 1 gold for this player at the end of every first phase. Now, mining can be very dangerous business, and it can get more dangerous the more crew you happen to have working. Sometimes, occasionally, you're going to flip over one of these cards and you're going to get a danger symbol. Now, every time one of these danger symbols this pops up, it's going to affect just how many resources you happen to get from that excavation. And unfortunately, the more workers you have at a space, the more horribly you're going to be affected by that disastrous excavation. Basically, the way this is going to work is every time there's a disaster during an excavation, you're going to lose the most valuable resources that were produced from that excavation, and that's going to affect every player unless they happen to have insurance or unless they happen to have a safety commissioner on their crew. So if our unfortunate group of workers right here happen to get this disaster, we know that they would get 6 zinc normally is what they normally get from this excavation. They'd also normally get 4 silver, and they'd also happen to get 1 gold. Now normally if this wasn't a disaster, White would be pretty darn happy because they have priority on the space since they happen to have the most strength there. Unfortunately, this disaster is going to destroy some of their resources. First thing you do before you do anything is you split the resources evenly between the workers for the players who happen to have that space. Now normally this excess would go to White since White in this example has priority. Unfortunately, there was a disaster here, which means every player needs to lose as many resources based on how strong their workers are. And you're going to lose those resources starting with the most valuable resource all the way down to least valuable. So normally White would get this gold resource, but they need to lose 2 plus 1, 3 of the most valuable resources from this excavation. So they're going to lose 1 gold and 2 silver, and all they're going to get out of this excavation is 3 zinc. Whereas the red player, with their only 1 strength worker, they only have to lose 1 resource, so they're going to have to lose the most valuable resource, which is silver, and they're going to get 3 zinc and 1 silver. And in an interesting little twist, White, who has the most powerful workers, is going to get the least amount of resources, and red is going to get the most resources. Which makes for an interesting mechanic where excavating can be dangerous and you can ride on other players' coattails, but you want to make sure you don't overdo it, and you also want to go out there and explore your own. Otherwise, you can end up wasting your time and not getting the resources you need. Now, there's 2 ways to protect yourself from these disasters that happen when you go out mining. The first and the best way to protect yourself from these disasters during mining is to go ahead and hire a safety coordinator. Now, the first time you hire a safety coordinator, you pay his cost, and he's with your crew, and he's with all your crews for the rest of the game. The first time you hire a safety coordinator, he's going to prevent you from losing the least valuable resource you would have lost during that whole incident where you lost all those resources. So if Red happened to have the first level safety officer and he was only supposed to lose 1 resource, that level 1 would stop him from losing any of those resources, and since he has a level 1 safety commissioner, he actually gets to keep all of those resources. Now if White happened to have a level 3 safety officer hired, and again that's permanently part of your crew for the rest of the game, it would have actually stopped them from losing all 3 of those resources, and that means they would have been able to keep that gold and both of those silver, which makes those safety officers extremely important in this game. The other way you can prevent yourself from completely being wiped out when you lose these resources to these disasters is by buying insurance. Now insurance, you get a chance to buy insurance before the start of every digging phase, and insurance costs 1 cube per insurance to buy. Now you can use any one of your cubes that you happen to have to buy insurance, but generally the strategy is to use your zinc cubes to buy insurance. And what insurance is going to do is every time you're forced to lose a resource, instead of actually losing that resource, you're going to lose part of it and you're going to get it back in replacement as the next lower value. So if The white player in this example didn't actually have a safety officer yet, and they did happen to have one level of insurance to protect them from any kind of disaster. They would lose the 1 gold, and it would be replaced with 1 silver. And I'm sorry, I misspoke. I was looking at the single worker right here. Since white actually lost 3 resources in this example, it was 1 gold and 2 silver. Insurance only protects your least valuable resource you would have lost in this example. That's why safety commissioners are a little bit better in this regard. The insurance is going to stop him from losing the least valuable of all resources he would have lost. So instead of losing this 3rd silver, he'd actually lose that and then be replaced with a copper in place of it. So generally, these insurance tiles are really good for protecting you from losing gold or silver. You actually don't want to use them for saving your copper or definitely your zinc, because you use a zinc generally to get these insurance tokens to begin with. Once you've gone through all that and players have had a chance to operate their mining shafts, if they happen to have any in play, and there are no mining shafts in the first round, so you know to skip those during the first round because it's impossible to get a mining shaft in play in the first round, you're going to move on to the stock market board. And only the players who happen to put a vice president on the stock market board can use it. And you're going to see a certain amount of spaces on the stock market board, which is diminishing, which means that the first person to use the stock market board is going to get the most uses out of it. The last person is going to get the least amount of uses and only get 2 uses. And the way a stock market board works is you can sell or buy resources based on the price. You can sell zinc for 400 or buy zinc for 400, copper for 600, silver for 800, and gold for 1,000. Now each transaction can only be done once, and it's only a one-way transaction. So if you happen to have 5 gold and let's say 6 silver, if you wanted to sell both of these resources, it would actually be 2 sales on the stock market. So your first sale would be to sell the gold for 5,000, then purple will get a chance to do an action, white will get to do an action, then you get to get your second action, and you can sell all 6 of your silver, which is allow you to go ahead and get $4,800 for that. And then with your new found money, if you wanted to, you can use it to buy a whole bunch of copper or a whole bunch of zinc if you like. Just remember that each one of those transactions is going to cost you 1 action on the stock market board, and you only have 4 actions on the stock market board, 3 actions on the stock market board, or finally 2 actions on the stock market board. Once you're done with the stock market board, you're going to move on to phase 3, where you get to do up to as many actions depending on what space you manage to hold on to with your vice president. The first player is going to be able to take 4 actions on the phase 3 board. Second player is going to get 3 actions, 2 actions, and finally 1 action for the person who placed their vice president here 4th. So that's why it's very important to get that early placement of your vice president during that auction in the beginning of the game. Now the available actions you can take on the phase 3 board are, and each one of these is going to cost 1 movement on this little track right here, is you can sell resources for victory points. And that's going to tell you how many resources you need to discard to get how many victory points. So if you discard 2 gold, you get 2 victory points, all the way down to 8 gold to get 3 victory points. And you're going to do these in order. So the first player may get this tile, second player may get this tile, third player may get this tile, but you have to discard that many resources to get that many victory points for the rest of the game. And then the final thing you can do on the phase 3 board is to upgrade your crew. There are 4 different upgrades. Each one of the upgrades will cost you 1 movement on the action track here. You can improve the skill of your workers from a 1 to a 2, or you can go from a 2 to a 3, and from a 3 to a 4, and that costs various amounts of money, which is listed on your player board. And that's going to change depending on how many players you have playing. You can buy a mine shaft. Now a mine shaft can only be placed on a space that has already not been excavated. You can upgrade your safety commissioner, or you improve the ability of your workers to move on the planet itself. Once that's done, you're going to go back to the beginning of the round again for a new round, and you're going to start with the auction, where you're going to see who is going to bid the most to be able to place your vice presidents first on the board. You're going to adjust player order over here for the control board for your ability to move on the board. Then you can keep going through all the phases. Again, this is going to go on until you reach the end game victory condition, and that's going to be the end of the game. You're going to count the victory points, and you can get your victor. There's only 3 more concepts to explain to you, and then I'll go ahead and show you a sample game of Rockwell. Now the first, most important thing I need to explain to you is about the achievements themselves. Now the interesting thing about achievements is you get those achievements the moment you reach their requirement. You instantly get the achievement. So the moment you have 2 of your workers that are strength 4, Doesn't matter what you did to get to that strength 4, the immediate moment you do that, you're going to take the top tile and it's going to be added to your player board as a victory point for the end of the game. The next thing to understand is the bribery board. Now the bribery board is very interesting, and you can only use the bribery board if you happen to put one of your vice presidents in one of these 2 slots. Now there's only 3 bribes available per round, and if you happen to have 2 players using the bribery board, that means they're going to be splitting these bribes up depending on who uses them first. Now the way a bribe works is if you happen to be on a space next to another player, you can pull that player onto your same space as long as it's not currently excavated. So for example, purple happens to be right here on this space right now. It's purple's turn. After they activate their worker, they can spend one of these bribery tokens to move an adjacent player onto their space. All it does is cost them discarding the current bribery token for doing that. And if that happens to activate an excavation, then you're going to go ahead and resolve the excavation. You're going to flip the card and get the resources based on whatever your excavation would be, and that's going to be the end of that player's activation. The only trick for a bribery action is you can't bribe your own workers, which makes sense, and you can't bribe a player either into the center of the earth to have them burn up, and you can't bribe another player to enter a space that's already been excavated. So red, who would have a bribery token right here, can't actually bribe green to come onto the space because it's already been excavated, so there's no way to bribe somebody onto that space. The other space you can have is the subcontractor space. Now there's 3 subcontractors of higher, and they're going to be controlled by this 4-sided die. Now the strength of the contractor is going to be based on however much you pay for them, but a subcontractor cannot be stronger than their current level of the planet. So a subcontractor hired in the A layer can only be a strength 1, a B layer can be strength 2, C layer can be strength 3, and the D layer can be strength 4. Now what you're going to do is if you happen to be the person who puts your vice president in a place to hire a subcontractor, is you simply pay the cost for that subcontractor, and he's going to be associated with that worker on that space. So for example, if purple happened to be on this space, which is a level 4 excavation site, and if it was a green player's turn, they could pay the cost for a subcontractor, hire the subcontractor, and now they have a total of 4 workers on the space. It's a level 4 place. That would immediately cause an excavation, and not only that, the subcontractor adds to the strength of the player. So at this point, these players are equal strength in priority if it came down to the extra resources being split up between the players. I think I've explained to you enough how to play Rockwell. This has gone on fairly long, and unfortunately this is one of those games that takes a lot to explain because there's a lot of minute details to the game. The nice thing about the game though is once you know how to play, it flows a heck of a lot better than this tutorial may seem. There's just a couple small minute mechanics that you gotta get used to, and once you're used to it, it's a very nice flowing game. I'm going to go ahead and clean everything up, set the game up for a 4-player game, and show you exactly what Rockwell looks like once it's played. I got the game set up again for a 4-player game. Now all players are going to start with a couple resources again. Each player is going to start with 3 zinc, 2 copper, 1 silver, and $3,000 worth of cash. Each player is going to start with one of their workers on one of the entry spaces for the mining board. And I already went ahead and randomized their starting player order for the management board just to start the game. Now at the beginning of the game, after you've got the boards all set up, each player needs to do an auction to see which player is going to be able to place their presidents on the board exactly first. We're going to go ahead and do kind of a mock thing. We'll go ahead and say that white is going to auction 1. And again, these are all going to be hidden so nobody knows exactly how much each person is pointing out for their auction. And then you also have the hidden scoring and everything like that. But again, I want to show you how the game is played, so I'm going to have everything out in the open just to make it a little simpler. So the white player to start the game is going to put out a copper cube, which is worth $600. The red player is going to go ahead and put out 2 zinc cubes, which is going to be worth $800. The green player is going to go ahead and put out $300 for their auction, and the purple player is going to put out $500 for their auction. So looking at this, it looks like red is going to be auctioning the most because they're auctioning out $800 worth of materials. So we know that they are going to be the first to place their vice presidents on the board. So red is going to be first on the management track. The next person who paid out the most is the person who put out $600, which was for the copper resource. We know that that was the white player, so white is now going to be player number 2 on the management board. Then we see that purple put out $500, making them player number 3. And then green, who put out only $300, is going to be the final player. Once all these resources have been paid for the auctioning for the play order, they are discarded and they're actually removed from each player's monetary resources. Players are now going to place their vice presidents on the phase boards, which are going to allow them to interact with the various phases of the game. Red gets to go first, and they're actually going to choose the first spot on the stock market track, guaranteeing that they can sell any resources they happen to make on this early stage of the game. Next person who gets to go is going to be the white player. They're actually going to go ahead and take the bribery space, trying to see if that's going to work out for them. Next is going to be purple. Purple is going to take the stock market. And then finally, the green player is also going to go ahead and take the stock market. What this means now is that white has no access to the stock market on the first round of the game. We're going to go back to red, who's going to place their second president, and they want to make sure they get some upgrades. White also wants some upgrades, which is going to be pretty challenging them because they only have a certain amount of cash because they can't access the stock market. Next is going to be purple. Purple wants to do some upgrades, and then finally green is going to go ahead and do this board because they want to make sure they're doing some upgrades later on in that phase. Now, since one of the players has placed one of their vice presidents in this top row, that means we're going to change the order of the controlled cubes. The white player is going to be the new first player, and the rest of the cubes are going to maintain their current order based on the original order we had before. So the order of placing the workers and moving the workers changed ever so slightly based on the fact that one of the players managed to put one of their vice presidents on this main track right here. Now that we're done with the placing of the vice presidents, we move on to the phase where each player gets a chance to buy insurance. And usually it's a good idea to buy insurance for each player. So each player is going to go ahead and sacrifice one zinc cube for each one of them, making sure that each player has one insurance cube. So it's a good thing to do the first round for the simple fact that you usually have a strength 1 worker on each one of your spaces, and that'll cover one loss from a danger card that may pop up. Once all the players are done with their insurance, we're going to go ahead and move on to the first round where we're going to start moving our workers on the board. We're going to go ahead and make sure we start in the player order of the control cube. So the white player gets to move one of their workers first. White is going to take one of the workers, and they're going to go ahead and move from here to here, moving to the first level A layer. And then white has the option to use one of the bribery packets if they want to. Unfortunately, there's no players that bribe because you can't bribe a player who's in one of the mining shaft entrances. You'd only bribe a player who's actually on the player board itself. White's made their one move, so we're now going to move to the red player who's going to go ahead and move one of the workers. Red's going to go ahead and move one worker right here. We're now going to move to the purple player who's going to go ahead and move one worker right here. And then we're going to move to the green player who's going to go ahead and move one worker right here. That's the end of the first mining round. We're going to move to the second mining round where we're going to start with a white player again. White is going to go ahead and activate this worker right here. They're going to move this worker onto this space right here. This space requires a total of 4 strength to make sure you go ahead and start an excavation there, so we're not quite ready, but the white player has access to bribery tokens. Now, white cannot bribe their own other worker right here, but the purple player is a prime candidate for bribery, and we're going to go ahead and do that. We simply discard one bribery token, move this purple player onto here. We now have a total of 4 strength on this section of the planet right now, and that's going to go ahead and activate an excavation. So we're now going to go ahead and flip over this tile right here, and we're going to go ahead and reveal what resources we're going to get. Now, since this was a level 4 section on the board, we're going to make sure we draw a level 4 card, and again we ignore any resource symbols that are actually on the tile itself because that only matters for mine shafts only, and we don't have any mine shafts here. And additionally, we can't build any mine shafts here because once a tile has been revealed, you can't build a mine shaft there. So we're going to go ahead and reveal a level 4 card, and we're going to get a disaster. We're going to get 6 zinc. We're going to get 4 silver. And we're going to get 1 gold that we have to divide evenly among these 4 players. We have 4 different players. They need to share these resources evenly. So it looks like red and green and white are each going to get 1 zinc. They're each going to get 1 silver apiece, and then we don't have enough of these resources left over to share equally among the other players, so they're going to go to whichever player gets priority for extra resources. So now remember the order we check for whoever gets the excess resources. The first thing we're going to do is look for a mine shaft. Now in the first round there's never a mine shaft, so we can go ahead and ignore that. Then we're going to look for whoever has the most strength there. Now all the players are tied there for strength, so we know that no player has the most strength. So that's not going to be used for the deciding factor either. So we move to the third deciding factor, which is we need to figure out who was the player who activated the excavation. Now we know white is the player who activated this excavation because they moved here. It was their turn. Even though they pulled the purple player over, it was their action to do that. So they were the active player, so they are going to get the extra resources. Now before we do anything, we got to handle the disaster. Every player needs to discard one resource of the most valuable kind they got, or they can sacrifice one of their insurance tokens. Now purple doesn't want to sacrifice an insurance token, so they're going to lose one silver, and that's going to give them one blue resource for the purple player. The white player, they're going to go ahead and actually sacrifice their insurance token because this is a gold, and the gold is worth keeping. So this gold is going to turn into a silver, and all these resources are going to be given to the white player. We're going to move on to green. Green doesn't want to sacrifice an insurance token, so they're going to lose a silver. They're going to get to keep the zinc. And then finally red, they're actually going to go ahead and sacrifice their insurance token here, which is going to turn this silver into a copper. And they're going to get the silver and the copper as their resources gained for this excavation. Now finally, before we finish this excavation action, we need to give this player to whichever player actually activated the excavation, because whichever player gets 6 activations is going to get one of the achievements, and the first person to do that is going to get 4 victory points for doing that. White was the player who started this excavation, so the white player is going to get this card, and they're going to place it next to their player board. That's the end of the white player's activation. We're now going to move on to the red player, and they get to decide what they want to do. The red player is going to go ahead and move their pawn from this mine shaft right here, and then go ahead and occupy this space with the white player. We're going to go ahead and move on to the purple player, who's going to go ahead and move off of this mine shaft, move onto the space right here, which is going to trigger another excavation. This is a strength 3 section of the planet. We have a total of 3 strength, which is going to trigger that excavation. And since it's a level 3 section, we're going to draw a level 3 card, and we're going to go ahead and resolve that. This excavation is going to produce 3 zinc, and it's going to produce 8 copper. We need to divide this up among, looks like 3 players in this space, and we need to make sure we divide up as evenly as possible. Then we need to figure out who's going to get the leftovers. So each player is going to get 1 zinc apiece, each player is going to get 2 copper apiece, and that's going to leave 2 copper left over, which is going to go to the player, again in priority order. No mine shafts, equal strength, so it's going to go to the player who activated this excavation, which happens to be the purple player. So the purple player is going to get the extra resources, and since there was no dangers on this space, we don't have to worry about losing any of our resources to one of those dangers, and we get to go ahead and finish this excavation. Now since the purple player activated this excavation, they're the one who's going to go ahead and get this excavation card. And remember, as soon as one player happens to get 6 excavation cards, they're going to get that achievement, which is worth victory points at the end of the game. We're now going to start the third excavation round, and we're going to go ahead and start with the white player. The white player is going to move their pawn or the worker right here. We're going to move on to the red player, who's going to move their pawn right here. And then we're going to move on to the purple player. They're going to go ahead and move out here to this space right here. And then finally the green player is going to follow behind the purple player. At the end of the third excavation, we're now going to move on to the fourth excavation round right now. The white player is going to go ahead and move 1 pawn right here, and this is the active pawn right here. So what they're going to do from now is they're going to go ahead and use one of the bribery tokens, and they're going to go ahead and pull red over into their space. It's now the red player's turn. He's going to go ahead and move his pawn right here, which is going to activate an excavation, and we're going to see what kind of resources we're going to get. This is a level 3 area of the planet, so we're going to go ahead and find out what kind of resources are going to come out for our 3 players to share. We're going to flip over an excavation card, and we're going to get 7 zinc and 4 copper that we have to split up among the players here. So we have to split this 3 ways, so it looks like everybody's going to get 2 zinc, everybody's going to get 1 copper, and then we need to give the remainder by priority. Again, we need to go through all the 3 requirements. There's no mine shafts, we have equal strength, So it looks like the person who activated the excavation gets the extra resources, which is going to be the red player. And we're going to go ahead and send these resources to each one of these players. And finally, the person who activated this excavation gets the excavation card. Finally, we move on to the purple player is going to go ahead and take this spot right here, and then the green player is also going to take their action, taking that spot there. We're now done with all 4 of the excavation actions. We move to the mining actions, part of the first phase. Since there are no mines out during the first round of the game, we might as well just skip that and we go ahead and move on to the stock market. Now we're going to move on to the stock market phase, and we're going to start with the red player. The red player is going to start off by selling 5 copper cubes, which if we look over at the stock market, we see that 5 copper cubes is worth 5 times 600, or happens to be worth $3,000. So that one transaction is going to gain them $3,000, and that'll be their one action on the stock market bar. Now it's time for the purple player. They get the option to sell resources also. Purple player is also going to sell 5 of his copper cubes, which will also be worth $3,000 to them, which is be one action on the stock market. That's going to leave them with 2. Now it's the green player's turn to do the same. Now the green player doesn't have as many copper cubes, and they do have a couple zinc cubes and a silver cube. What they're going to do is they're going to go ahead and sell their 1 silver cube, which is going to be worth $800. Just to make things simple, I'll trade in 200 to go ahead and take 1,000, leaving the green player with $3,500. Now we get to go back to the red player to see if they want to do any other sales or transactions. The red player is going to decide that they're going to sell just 1 silver cube, which is going to be 1 stock market auction. Probably not the best thing to do, but I'm trying to show you exactly how the game plays. Give up 200, take 1,000 for a total $800 transaction. It's time for the purple player. They're actually not going to do any more sales at all, so they're going to decline. They're going to pull their present off the board. The green player is also going to decline, pulling their present off the board. And now the red player has the option to do 2 more transactions. They actually don't desire doing transactions, so now we're going to be done with the stock market phase. And now we move to phase 3, where we get to do improvements and sell some of our minerals for victory points. The first thing the red player is going to do is they're actually going to upgrade one of the workers. Now remember what I told you is anytime you have enough workers on a space, it's going to trigger an excavation immediately, even if it happens during other phases of the game. So the red player is going to spend $1,500, which is the current cost in a 4-player game, to raise a level 1 worker up to a level 2 worker. That's going to be a total of 3 strength on that space. That is going to trigger an excavation for these players right there. So we're going to go ahead and reveal this section, and we're going to go ahead and see what kind of resources we happen to get from our excavation. It's a level 3 section, so we're going to draw a level 3 excavation card, and we're going to get a danger symbol. We're going to get a lot of resources. We're going to get 3 zinc, we're going to get 6 copper, and we're going to get 2 gold that we need to split up between our workers here. So we're going to start with each player getting 1 zinc, each player is going to get 3 copper, and then each player is going to get 1 gold. Now unfortunately we have a danger space, so the players need to lose resources, but before we do that we need to give up the extra to whoever has dominance, or priority I should say. So since we know there's no mine shafts here, we look for the next thing to see who has the most strongest workers. Happens to be red, so red is going to get the extra resources. Now we need to figure out what kind of danger are going to cause losses of resources. We'll start with the red player who has 2 workers, so he needs to lose 2 resources, starting with the most valuable resources. So he's going to lose the gold one, and he's going to lose the copper resources. And unfortunately the red player no longer has insurance, so he's actually going to lose these resources, and they're gone. Now the white player only has a strength 1 worker, so he has to lose 1 of his most valuable resources. Unfortunately they also don't have insurance, so they're going to lose their 1 gold. So we're going to split up our resources this way, as red is going to get 2 copper, 2 zinc, white is going to get 3 copper and 1 zinc. It's now white's turn to make improvements or make deliveries. They're going to go ahead and decide to make an improvement, and they're going to go ahead and build a mine shaft. They're going to build a mine shaft right here on this space. Now the rules for a mine shaft, when you build it, it either has to be on a space that you currently have a worker on, or next to a space where you have a worker. And the caveat to that is you can't build a mine shaft on a space that's already been developed, and you can't build a mine shaft that happens to be other players' pieces happen to be on it. So for example, red and purple are on this undiscovered space. I can't build a mine shaft there because the purple player was there. But if white was there alone, I could build a mine shaft there. Since that's not the case, I'm going to go ahead and choose this space right here, which is one space away from my player. Perfectly legal move, and that's exactly where we're going to go ahead and build our mine shaft. It's now purple's turn. They're going to go ahead and actually upgrade one of the crews, which is going to cost them $1,500 to do. And they're going to upgrade this crew from a 1 all the way up to a 2. Again, this is a 4 strength space, so not quite enough to reveal and excavate that location. Now the green player's turn. They're going to go ahead and do an action. And what green is going to go ahead and do is they're going to go ahead and cause an excavation on this space. Green is going to go ahead and spend the $1,500 it requires. And they're going to upgrade this worker from a 1 to a 2, which means we now have a total of 4 strength with the workers, and that means we're going to have to excavate this space. It's a strength 4 level area, so we're going to make sure we use the level 4 card, and we're going to go ahead and divvy up the resources between these two players. We're going to get 3 zinc, 2 copper, and we get 5 silver to divvy up between the players. Each player is going to get 1 zinc and 1 copper apiece. They're also going to get 2 silver apiece, and then the remainder is going to go to whoever triggered the excavation. Since green triggered the excavation, they're going to get the remainder of the resources, and they're also going to get the excavation card they came across from this excavation. And now every player has at least 1 excavation towards the first achievement of 6 excavations completed. We now come back to the red player. They're going to take their 1 action. They're going to go ahead and upgrade another worker. This one's going to go from a 1 to a 2, which again is going to cost them $1,500, which they can pretty easily afford right now, and that'll be their 1 action. It's now going to be white's turn. Their action and go ahead and hire a safety coordinator. The first level of the safety coordinator is going to cost them $1,500, and that's going to prevent them from losing 1 cube in case there's a disaster. That'll be their action. Now we get to come up to the purple player who needs to figure out what they want to do for their action. The purple player is also going to decide to go ahead and upgrade one of the workers for $1,500. This level 1 worker is going to become a level 2 worker, and that's going to be the last action purple can complete. Green can't complete any more actions, so he's out of the 3rd round, so we come back to the red player. Now red is actually going for an achievement, so he's going to level up a 3rd worker, and we're going to go ahead and pick this worker right here. We're going to level him from 1 to level 2, which is going to cost the red player $1,500, which again we can easily pay because the red player actually has a decent amount of cash right now. It's also going to give him the first achievement, which is as soon as you get 3 level 2 workers, you get 1 achievement. So we now have an achievement worth 5 victory points at the end of the game. Simply place it on your board as a reminder so you know you got that first achievement, and that's in the red player's action. We're going to go to the white player who's going to have their final action for the 3rd phase. The white player isn't liking the fact that he has a whole bunch of level 1 workers, so he's going to blow the last of his cash, which is going to leave him without any money. So they definitely need to make sure they get on the stock market next round. And he's going to level up one of his workers. You're going to go level up this worker from a level 1 to a level 2, and that's white's final action. Now we come back to the red player has 1 final action to do if they like. Red is going to go ahead and invest in a pretty solid future, and hopefully they can get a good turnaround on their investment. They're going to go ahead and spend the $1,500 it takes to go ahead and build their first mine shaft, and then we're going to build that mine shaft on this level 6 space, hoping it's going to be a good turnaround for them for the rest of the game. That's the end of the first round of Rockwell. We simply pull all the presidents off the boards, and each player gets to start a new round with an auction. And if any subcontractors were used, we make sure we pull them back off the board. We reset all the bribery counters. Everybody gets their vice presidents back, and we start a brand new round where we start off again with an auction. We're going to start off another round with the auction. Now remember, white really needs to make sure they win this auction, so they're going to spend a lot of money on their auction, hopefully guaranteeing they get access to the stock market, because if they don't, they're going to be in a lot of trouble because they're going to have no money to continue with for the rest of this round, which will stymie their development quite a bit. Every player will go ahead and put out their auction. Again, it's secretive, but again, just to show how the game is played, I'm pointing everything out in front of you. And then everybody's going to reveal their bids, and we're going to figure out player order from whoever bidded the most. We're going to see that white went ahead and bid $1,600 worth of resources. Red bid $500, $400 for the cube, and $100. Green did a bid of $800 plus $800, which is $1,600, which is going to tie white. And finally, purple did a bid of a $400 plus a $600 for a total of $1,000. So we figure out the tie between our two players, which means the play order between these two players isn't going to change at all. So white and green are going to keep their current order, and they're going to be first and second place. And then we're going to see that red at 500 is going to be last, and purple with their bid of 1,000 is going to be third. So the order that we're going to place our presidents in is going to be white, green, purple, and red. And that's going to be the order of our president placement for this round of the game. Go ahead and start with the placement of the presidents. White is going to go ahead and place first for the stock market. Next player to go is going to be the green player, so green is going to take their president. They're also going to need some funds, so they're going to go ahead and put their green on the stock market. Move on to the purple player, who also looks at their finances and decides that they probably want to make sure they have access to the stock market, because it's something you make sure you want to always have a little bit of cash when you need it. And plus it also hinders the red player who doesn't have much money left, and they won't have any access to the stock market this round. So kind of a tactical play on the purple player's part. Finally, red is going to play, and they're going to go ahead and decide that since they can't have access to the stock market, they're going to make sure that they're going to get a lot of resources this round, so they're going to go ahead and hire a subcontractor. White is also wanting access to the subcontractors, so that way they can guarantee that they can get some good mining this turn, and they want to make sure they get the mining so they get all the resources. So they're going to place their vice president for the mining space. We're now up to the green player. And green likes his current positioning, but he thinks he can probably take advantage of using the fact that they can do a little bit of bribery, so they're going to go ahead and take the bribery space. We're going to come up to the purple player. Purple wants to do some advancements, especially since they're pretty sure they're going to make some money this round. And the red player, well, you can't put another player over here on this board because they already have one vice president on this board. This board is full, so red only has one option. They got to put their worker down on the improvement board. We placed all our vice presidents. Now we need to reorganize the control board based on what players have placed their workers, or I'm sorry, the vice presidents on this main board. We're going to see that green is going to be the new first player. Red is going to be the second player. White is going to be the third player, and that's going to leave purple as the final player when it comes to moving our workers for the first phase. We go ahead and move the phase marker, or the mining marker, to the first phase where we get a chance to buy insurance. And everybody's going to take a chance to buy a little bit of insurance. So everybody's going to discard one zinc cube because it costs 1 cube per insurance that you want to get, so it's always smart to make sure you discard your least valuable cube. That's usually the best strategy. Plus, you really don't need a lot of insurance cubes, especially if you have some safety officers on your team. That's going to be the end of that. We now get to move on to the movement of our excavators. We go ahead and start our excavation round, and it looks like green is going to be our first player. So green is going to do some tactical movement, which is going to help them the most and hopefully hinder white the most. We're going to move one space, and now since this is our active worker, we're going to go ahead and spend one bribery. We could either pull red or purple or white or red over, but if we pull white, we're not going to have to do a three-way split. It's still going to stay a two-way split, but if we pull over red or purple, it would become a three-way split, so we get less resources. So of course the smartest thing is to pull over the white, which is going to be a total of 4, and then if we get a disaster, white is going to be hit hardest by the disaster. We have a total of 4 here, so we're going to make sure we go ahead and reveal this strata of the planet. And then we're going to go ahead and see what kind of resources we discover in this level 4 section, and we reveal that tile, or that card. We're going to go ahead and get 4 zinc, 3 copper, and 3 silver. And we're going to go ahead and divvy that up. It's going to be 2 zinc for the white, 2 zinc for green, and then it's going to be 1 silver for white, 1 silver for green, and 1 copper for silver, or 1 copper for white, 1 copper for green, and it's going to leave 1 silver and 1 copper left over, which is going to go to whoever has priority on the space. Nobody has a mining tile, so next priority is going to be whoever has the most strength, which just happens to be the white. So white is going to get all the extra resources for the space, and green's going to get their allotment of resources. And since green is the one who actually activated the excavation, green is the one who's going to get the excavation card. Now this was actually a very fortunate round for white because white has just managed to get an achievement. Since white currently has 8 zinc and 8 copper, they've managed to unlock one of the achievements, so they're going to go ahead and take the top achievement tile. This one states as soon as you improve that you have 8 zinc and 8 copper, you're going to get 4 victory points. That's going to be added to this player's board right on the space that shows for that matching symbol. And they simply just place it down, and they have now acquired one of the 6 achievements they need to win the game. And again, all you have to do is just prove that you have those resources, and since you hide your resources normally behind a board, you do have to show the other players that you do have those resources. You simply put them in your hand, you pull them out from behind your board, prove it, get your achievement, and put your resources back behind your board. We now come to the red player's turn. They're going to go ahead and move one of their workers, and then we're going to move to the white player's turn, who's going to go ahead and pick one of their workers to go ahead and move. White is going to go ahead and move one of their workers from here to here. Now, White would love to be able to hire a subcontractor right now because it would only be $1,000 for a level 1 subcontractor, and that would be a total of 5 strength. They'd have priority, and they'd get the vast majority of the resources from the space. Unfortunately, White doesn't have any money right now, so even though they have a vice president on the subcontractor space, all they really did was just guarantee that they got earlier turn order because they don't actually have the money to hire a subcontractor. We're going to now move on to the purple player's turn. They're going to go ahead and take their movement. They're going to move from here to here, and now we go back to the green player's turn after we advance the mining tracker. Green's going to go ahead and start their turn, and they're going to go ahead and decide to trigger the mining from this space right here. We have a total of 5 strength, which is definitely enough to reveal this layer of the board. We flip it over, and then we go ahead and reveal a level 5 card, and we're going to go ahead and get resources based on that level 5 card. We're going to get a total of 6 zinc, and then we're going to go ahead and get 3 copper, and we're going to go ahead and get 2 gold. We're going to split that up evenly for 2 zinc for every person. Every person gets 1 copper, and the remaining is going to be 2 gold. Now we need to figure out who gets priority here. Now if we look at the board, we see that we have 2 people who have an even strength, and we have 1 person who has a 1 strength. Now we need to figure out who triggered the excavation since we have 2 equal strengths. Now remember how the priority goes. We look for mine, and then we look for strength, and if that doesn't work, we figure out who triggered the space in itself. And since green is the one who actually triggered the space, green is the one who's going to get the extra resources, which is going to be 2 gold, which is going to be very nice for this player. And additionally, since they actually triggered the excavation, they're also going to get the excavation card. So green gets 2 zinc, 1 copper, and 2 gold. And then the other players get an even split on the remaining resources. The green player right now is actually very close to getting their first achievements for the 8 zinc and the 8 copper. Unfortunately, they're 1 copper shy. If they manage to get 1 more copper, they're going to snag that next achievement, which is going to give them some victory points. Now the green player's turn is over. They do have the option to do a bribe if they would like. The way that would work is that since this is the active player or the active unit, that's the only unit that can do a bribe. If they want to, they can pull this unit down here if they'd liked. Doesn't look like it's actually going to do anything advantageous for them, so they can go ahead and just ignore the bribe, leaving 2 bribes for them to use later. We're now going to move on to the red player's turn. Red is going to go ahead and make 1 movement with this level 1 strength worker right here. We're now going to move on to white, who's going to take this level 1 worker. They're going to go ahead and move right here, which is a total of 2 strength on a space and needs 5. Now we move on to purple, who's going to try to get in on this action, hopefully, for a total of 3 strength on this space. We now go back to the green player, who's thinking that they're going to find a way to hop in here and get in a little bit of the resources, hoping to piggyback on everybody else's work. They're going to move down their worker right here, and then they're going to spend their 1 bribe token, and they're going to go ahead and pull down purple right here, which is going to be a total of 5 strength on the spot, and now we're going to reveal this level of the planet. We go ahead and flip this over and find out what kind of resources we're going to get. And now since we actually have a mine shaft here, the white player is going to get 1 silver and 1 copper from this space for the rest of the game, which is going to be a nice bonus for the white player until they move that mine shaft. And you do have the option of moving mine shafts later on in the game if you want to spend the resource cost for doing that. This is a level 5 area, so we flip over the level 5 card, and we see that we're going to get 11 zinc for this area. Now I got a whole bunch of multi-space zinc, so I'm going to go ahead and trade these out really quickly for the extras I got for all the players since they got a lot of singles, so we bounce this out. So I start handing out all the zinc. Now we have 11 zinc that we need to divide evenly between the 4 players since every player has their resources here. So we're going to be able to hand out, that's going to be 2 for each player with a remainder. Then we need to figure out exactly which player is going to get that remainder of exactly 3 cubes. Now remember how the priority works. The first thing we look for is for a mining shaft. So it looks like that's going to be our first objective to see who gets the extra resources. So since white has a mine shaft here and they also have a worker here, they're actually going to get 5 zinc resources. Go ahead and trade that in for 1 large cube, which is worth 5, and then all the other remaining players are going to get exactly 2 zinc resources. And since we have somebody who triggered the excavation, that player is going to get this card. And that's actually the 4th excavation that green's triggered. If he happens to get 2 more cards, he's actually going to get the 6th excavation achievement, which is going to be worth 4 victory points to the first player who happens to do it. That's the green player's turn, and we now get to move on to the red player's turn. Red is going to go ahead and move 1 worker right here, and then they're going to go ahead and spend $1,000, and they're going to go ahead and hire a subcontractor. And since they only spent $1,000, it's going to be a level 1 subcontractor. So they now have a total of 3 strength on this space. That's the red player's turn. We're now going to move on to white, who has a pretty good idea that this place is going to be taken by red, who's trying to excavate this spot. So they're going to try to figure out what they want to do to best help their strategy right now. So white decides that they want to minimize their risk to themselves just in case there's a danger with this excavation. So instead of moving the level 2 worker here, they're going to think strategically and move the level 1 worker there. That way if there is a danger, they're going to lose 1 resource. As opposed to they move this level 2 worker there, they have a potential of losing 2 resources. So that's a little bit of the strategy for the game right there. That's white player's turn. It's now the purple player's turn. They're going to go ahead and move here and hopefully be able to trigger that space pretty soon. We move on to the final mining action for this turn. Then we're going to start with the green player. So again, the green player is basically in the same position that the white player was just a moment ago. They can move this worker right here, trigger the excavation here, but if it's a danger tile, they're going to lose 2 resources. Where if they play smart and just move this worker right here, they'd only have a potential of losing only 1 resource, and that's what the green player is going to do. We move the 1 worker here, reveal this layer of the planet, and then we're going to go ahead and see exactly what kind of resources are going to be available to us from exploring here. We end up with a pretty good resource card here. Each player is going to get exactly 2 zinc. Each player is going to get 2 silver apiece. Each player is going to get 1 gold apiece, and there's going to be a remainder of 1 silver, which is going to go to the player who has priority on the space. No mine shaft, so it goes to the strongest player, which happens to be the purple player. Purple is going to get the extra silver, and green is going to get the excavation card and the rest of the resources. We now move to the red player's turn. They're going to go ahead and move the reminder here, and that's going to be a total of 6 strength for this area. We have 2 strength plus 2 plus the 1 for the subcontractor, which is a total of 5. Plus 1 more is a total of 6 strength, which is going to reveal this space and gain resources for the white and the red player since they're both on this space right now. It's a level 6 area, so we're going to draw a level 6 card, which is actually going to be very nice. It's going to give us 3 zinc, 7 copper, and 2 gold. We're going to go ahead and divvy up those resources evenly between the players. So each player is going to get 1 zinc. Each player is going to get 3 copper. And each player is going to get 1 gold. And there's going to be a remainder of 1 copper and 1 zinc that's going to go by priority. Since red has the mine, red's going to go ahead and get the extra resources. And since red is the one who triggered the excavation, red is also going to get to keep the excavation card. And now that the red player actually has 8 zinc and 8 copper, they're going to go ahead and trigger an achievement, and they're going to go get the achievement that's going to be worth 3 victory points. They're going to go ahead and add that to their player board. So now red is up to a total of actually 8 victory points. They're doing pretty good for themselves. The white player has 4 victory points, and green and purple have 0 victory points right now. It's now white's turn. They're going to go ahead and move this lonely miner out of their mine shaft, move them over to this space right here. We now move to the purple player. He gets to move their final pawn for this turn. They're going to move this pawn right here, and that's going to end the movement phase for a round. We now move this track marker over to the mining, and we figure out if anybody's got some mines, and they're going to get some resources for doing that. We're going to see that white has a mine that's going to produce 1 silver and 1 copper. So white is going to gain those resources, and then red is going to have a mine that's going to produce also 1 silver and 1 copper. We're now going to move on to phase 2 for the stock market, and we're going to handle these in player order. Looks like the white's going to get the first chance to use the stock market, and white is going to go ahead and decide to sell some resources and go ahead and make some cash. The first thing white is going to do is they're going to spend 1 action. They're going to go ahead and sell 15 zinc cubes, which is going to be a total of $6,000, which is going to be 1 transaction for them. They're going to go ahead and make $6,000 right there from 1 transaction. Now the green player gets a chance to also make a transaction. Now they don't want to sell any of their their copper, because they haven't gotten that achievement yet, but they do have quite a bit of silver to sell. So they're going to go ahead and sell their silver in an effort to make a little bit of money. They have 7 silver right now, so they'd sell it at $800 a piece, which is going to be a total of $5,600. So they'll go ahead and take $5,600 and they'll add that to their money pile. And that'll be their one sales action for now. And now the purple player gets to do some sales actions too. Purple doesn't have a lot of resources to sell right now, and they haven't gotten that achievement yet, so they don't want to sell too many resources. So they're just going to go ahead and sell 4 silver cubes, which are going to be worth $800 a piece for a total of $3,200. That'll be their one sales action for them on the stock market. They're going to take the cash from doing that, and then we'll go back to white, who gets to do their second sales action. White is going to go ahead and sell 7 copper cubes because they want to leave a little bit left over because there's an achievement they're trying to get the victory points for. Going to sell 7 copper times $600 a piece. That's going to be $4,200 they get to add. So now financially, the white player is doing pretty good for advanced turns, so they start advancing their mining corporation, actually start improving as a company. Let me go ahead and move on to the green player. Green's player is doing okay on money. They got about $7,600. They got a decent amount of resources, but they're still trying to get that certain achievement, so they got to make sure they watch exactly what they do. They're going to go ahead and save just enough zinc cubes so they get that achievement, then they're going to sell the remainder. They're going to sell 5 zinc cubes so they make $2,000 really quick. And that'll be a green second action. And now we get up to the purple player, who they are going to decide to, they're going to go ahead and use their one buying action to spend $1,000, and they're going to buy 1 single gold cube in an effort to make 1 delivery to score some points, since they're number 1 on the track in the 3rd phase. We now come back to the white player. They get to do one more, they still have 2 more actions to do on the sales track. White is going to go ahead and take a gamble and hope for an achievement. They're actually going to go spend $5,000 and buy 5 gold cubes, and they're working towards that one achievement, which is 6 of every resource, which is going to be worth 6 victory points if they happen to be the first person to do that. We now come to the green player, is going to go ahead and do their buy and sell action. They're actually going to do one thing because they want to get an achievement. They're going to go ahead and buy 1 copper for $600, which is how much it's going to cost to get that 1 copper. That's going to give them 1 single copper that they need. That's going to put them at 8 copper, 8 zinc. They prove it to the other players, and they're going to go ahead and get the achievement tile, which is going to give them 2 victory points, leaving this 1 victory point left over tile for the purple player as soon as they can manage to get that achievement. We come back to the white player, who can do 1 more buy or sell. They're actually pretty happy with where they stand. They're going to go ahead and end their turn. That's going to end the 2nd phase. We now move to the 3rd phase, where only purple and red can start making some deliveries and increasing their workforce. The first thing the purple player is going to do is they're going to deliver 2 gold, so they can go ahead and get a couple of victory points, not liking the fact that they're falling behind. And now, since this is a delivery token, this is one of the hidden scoring tokens, but again, since I'm playing with everything open, just showing you what we got. It's going to be worth 2 victory points for the purple player at the end of the game. That's their one action on the phase 3 board. Now the red player gets their chance to perform 1 action. Unfortunately, red doesn't have any money for any upgrades, but they definitely have some things they can do deliveries on. So they're going to do their first delivery, which is going to be 2 copper for 1 victory point, and that's going to be 1 action. We're going to come back to the purple player, and they get to decide what they want to do with their action. And we already know what they're going to do. They're going to start working on their upgrades. They're going to upgrade one of their workers for $1,500, which is something they need to do, which is going to give them another achievement, since they don't actually have that achievement yet for having 3 workers. So they're going to go ahead and make sure they take that achievement for having 3 workers at level 2, and that's going to be their action. Their second action, now we get to pick the red player's second action. Red is just going to go ahead and do a simple delivery. They're going to deliver 2 zinc, which will be worth 1 victory point at the end of the game. Not too bad of an action, but there's not much they can do with that money right now. We're going to go back to the purple player. They're going to go ahead and do their next upgrade action. The purple player is going to go ahead and spend $1,500 to go ahead and get their first mine shaft, and they're going to go ahead and add that to the board right here. Hopefully this will deliver pretty well for them in future turns. That's their third action. Now the red player gets to go back for their action. They're simply going to do another delivery to get a couple more victory points. They're going to go ahead and deliver 3 zinc, which is going to give them 1 more tile for 1 more victory point. That's their final action. Now purple has 1 action left to do. Now purple, for their final action, they're going to go ahead and do one final improvement. They're going to spend $1,500 to improve how well they can move across the board. From now on, for the rest of the game, all the workers can move up to 2 spaces on the same strata in either direction. You can move 1 or 2, so this guy could go from here all the way to here. These guys can move from here all the way over to here. And actually, now that I think of it, it probably would have been better to put this mining card right here, and then I could have gotten all 3 of my guys onto that space in one round and basically been able to get that mining space out. But that's hindsight. So we go ahead and spend $1,500. It's going to leave us with only $200, and that's going to be the end of the second round of Rockwell. At this point, we simply remove all subcontractors from the board, make sure we put them back on the board. All bribery briefcases return to the board exactly where they belong. We pull all our presidents or vice presidents back off the board, and each player gets to do the auction phase all over again. And we're going to continue doing this until either somebody has managed to get 6 achievements, which of 3 of these are going to be the main tier 3 achievements and any 3 of the tier 1 and 2 achievements, or somebody managed to get to the center of the core, and we happen to have 3 players going to do that in a 4-player game. If 3 players manage to get to the center of the core, that's going to bring out the final round of the game. Once the game is over, all the players are going to go ahead and add up all their victory points for the achievements they've gotten. They're going to add in all the victory points for all the deliveries they managed to make. And then each player is going to add up their remaining resources. They're going to get victory points based on exactly how many resources they have left over. That's going to be the 4 resources, plus also for money. Then you're simply going to add up all the victory points. Whoever has the most victory points is going to be the winner of the game. Showed you 2 full rounds of how to play Rockwell. Also explained to you how to play the game. I think you have a really good idea of how to play Rockwell now. I'm going to go ahead and end this tutorial video right now because it's running really long, basically because this was a really long game to teach. But again, like I said earlier, this is one of those games that once you know how to play, it actually flows very nicely. And I think I managed to show that when I showed you the sample gameplay. This has been another off-the-shelf board game tutorial video showing you how to play Rockwell. If you have any comments or questions, make sure you leave them in the YouTube comments below. If you liked what you saw today, make sure you check out my full review for Rockwell, where I'll discuss the component quality, how well the game plays at its various player counts, and give you my final thoughts on Rockwell, the board game.